Welcome to another episode of the Powerhouse Podcast. I am your host, Candy Barone, and I am thrilled and delighted as we once again have a powerhouse leader joining me in the ring to go a few rounds and really get into some big discussion around leadership among who knows what else as we get started. Before we dive deep, let me just say hello to my fabulous guest, Dr. Dorothy Martin-Neville. Welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Well, we are delighted to have you and super honored that you are taking some time to join us today. For those of you that might be joining us for the first time, this is our space to have those big, juicy, meaty conversations. We don't like to do the surface stuff on this show. We like to get into it. We like to do something that's actually going to push you perhaps out of your comfort zone, might trigger some things a little bit because that is the only effective way you grow. And this is our platform to dive into a space around leadership and what leadership means in today's environment. And as always, leadership is truly a function of how you choose to show up, how you choose to serve others, and how you choose to take responsibility inside of that space. So let me formally introduce you to my amazing guest, Dr. Dorothy Martin-Neville. As a founder of 4 companies, Dr. Dorothy is now an executive business coach and consultant, supporting women from all levels of success, Park Avenue, New York City to a small town in Maine. Combining her recognition that mindset and communication skills set us apart with her ability to make the complicated simple. Dorothy is someone to learn from so that you can live a life of power, purpose, passion, in the realization that anything is possible if you are willing to grow, risk, and make changes necessary. Your mindset and your ability to communicate make you invisible or make your presence known. It's your choice. I love that. We love talking about choices. For Dr. Dorothy, it is a presence claimed from being in an orphanage, living in the housing projects of South Boston, being a Catholic nun, an international airline stewardess, a wife, mother, psychotherapist, pioneer in integrative healthcare, a medical school instructor, graduate professor, and more. There is nothing this woman hasn't done. So tell me, I mean, that's the first question right out of the gate, right? How does all that fit for someone who's like, still living, in her 20s and hasn't lived this long life? How has someone had this many experiences, and what has that done for you as a leader as you're showing up in the world today?
Well, my first thought is I did not come here to survive this journey. I came here to live it. And if we are going to live our journey, we're going to jump in and just keep jumping and jumping and jumping. And the more you jump, the more opportunities come to you. And so it really becomes that willingness to keep on jumping as well as staying absolutely grounded in the process of doing that.
I love that. So talk about that a little bit, because that's an interesting dynamic or play, right? How do you jump and stay grounded at the same time?
I guess simplistically, I could say to you the practice of mindfulness. All right. I take time to meditate or do mindfulness, whatever word you want to use, that is irrelevant to me. I take time for meditation first thing in the morning and then last thing at night. And I think when you develop that practice, what ends up happening, at least my experience, the experience of literally thousands of people I've taught this to, that when you take the time in the morning to remember that you're sitting in your bed or your chair, wherever it is you choose to do this, and I'm here, and out there is my partner and my children and my work and my friends and all of my experiences. I'm over here. I am not any of those. They are simply things and people I have brought into my life, experiences I brought into my journey. But I am over here apart from all of that. When we remember that I am not any of that, there is an ability to consistently respond rather than react. If somebody attacks any one of those elements of my journey, they're not attacking me. It isn't personal. So it allows me the ability to see me as a part of, yet separate from, all of those experiences. So as an opportunity comes up and there's something I want to follow, I want to jump into, I'm aware that if it doesn't work, I'm not going to die. It's just that experience didn't work. And if it does work, it gives me the opportunity to grow in wisdom and knowledge and experience. And so everything is safe to risk. Everything is an opportunity to grow in ways I never would have grown without it. And so for me, why not jump in and keep on growing and becoming everything you're meant to be?
Well, and that perspective is so powerful, especially when you think about everything that you just talked about and that ability to say that it's safe to risk. When you create that practice, and we talk about it a lot of times as the bookends. It's the way to start your morning intention and evening reflection, and that mindfulness, that space of reflection, that going into who you are has to be part of that equation, both in how you start your day and how you finish your day. If you're ever going to have the opportunity to show up and lead in a capacity that's meaningful, in a capacity that's going to be impactful, because you've got to get this kind of in the right space first, right? And then close that out so that you're not carrying that, and allow yourself permission. And I hear a lot in a lot of what you're saying, that permission to take those chances, that permission to know that there's a safety net, even if it's an invisible one, there for you as part of this life experience. And I think that's quite beautiful, the way that you say that, knowing that there's safety in the risk.
Right.
I don't think that's something we consider very often. And I'm curious, now some people were just born with it. I know for me personally, not so much born with the ability to be mindful and present and meditate. Still some things that I work on at times. God bless some of those that just were totally dialed into spirit, source, God, whatever, from day one, right? Has that always been the case for you? And if not, what was your journey to finding mindfulness as being a tool to help you be grounded when you take those jumps?
I would say, I came from an orphanage, and then I was adopted and raised in the housing projects of the inner city. And initially, for the first few years, I wasn't allowed to live in my house because my mother and grandmother did not want an illegitimate child in a good Catholic home. So my father, who really is the one who wanted to adopt me, would get me up at 5:30 in the morning, put me in a sunsuit or a snowsuit, and put me outside in the playpen, and leave me there until 9:30 at night after my grandmother went to bed. Then he would come out and bring me in, give me dinner, and put me to bed. And so I think part of the gift of that experience, truly, every experience has gifts, there's always both sides to a story, is that I wasn't really a part of a family, and yet I wasn't not. All right? So living in this playpen from 3 until 6 years of age, when my grandmother fell down and broke a hip, was placed in a nursing home, then I was allowed to live in that house. I think what happened is that I was left with the reality that children have, so many little children will speak to their so-called invisible friends, and they're really speaking to those on the other side. I didn't have anybody to tell me that nobody was there. I didn't have anybody to tell me that, no, there's not really a little imaginary friend here. So I could live in that world, in that reality, all I wanted, and without worrying about somebody telling me that, what I knew wasn't real. Right. So I could live in that reality for as long as I chose to do so. And so by the time I was 6, a child is fairly well formed by 6 years of age. And so my spiritual awareness of so many elements to life was there. Yeah. And growing up, I had a dad who was very Irish, very Catholic, and a cop. So he was very much that traditional, what you would think of as an Irish Catholic cop from Boston, okay? And God bless his soul. And so what happened, I think, is that when he would point out how horrible certain people were, I was so aware that the people he was telling me I should play with, that I should go with, looked well. And yet they were the ones who were the cruelest, the meanest, the most judgmental and backstabbing. And the others, who were the punks, if you will, would have your back. So I learned very early that we don't judge anything by appearance. that we have to step aside and truly see beneath the appearance of things if we're going to know the truth. And so all of those experiences, I think, were a gift that supported me in recognizing, we can judge a book by a cover if we want to, but we're going to be missing the best part of the story.
Yeah. And I like to say that too. I'm like, it's interesting. You can always read the back jacket of the cover and you can kind of think where the story's going to go, but if you don't get into the chapters, and a good author knows that the story doesn't happen in the beginning of the book or the end, it's all the juicy little details in the middle. It's the building of the character, right? And it's interesting that you say that, because I have people that I'll even challenge sometimes when I'll say, my dad is my greatest blessing. And he was extremely Italian, Catholic, abusive, narcissistic. A lot of, again, it's the way you frame the story. And I look at that point where I was able to tap back into some of that, because I had a lot of anger. I was one of those. And so this is going to lead me to a question for you. I was one of those that got shut down in that space of imagination and how I dreamt and what I saw, because I've been a deep empath my whole life. Those things either were physically or figuratively beaten out of me one way or the other through some of my teachers, through my parent, through my father, through different things, right? And so my question around that, because I do think once you do some of that work and you step back in that space, for me, it's the best gift I was ever given. I do this work now because of the experiences I was gifted as a child, even though I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Those experiences allow me to connect and relate. And so I'm curious in the work that you do, because you do a lot of work around mindset and communication. How do you help someone who maybe has had that either physically, figuratively, or in some way beaten out of them, that ability to talk to their imaginary friends or connect into something that was bigger than themselves? How do you help an adult who has had maybe that kind of trauma, or just an average every day, we all have trauma, someone who doesn't believe in mindfulness or meditation? How do you get them connected in that space?
It's actually a reframe, because I did grow up with horrific physical abuse. And housing projects, alcoholism and violence is a way of life, for most families. And so that truly was something I know. And some of us got beaten down. I happened to be one that my parents spent a lot of time coming to the convent after school, after dinner, so that they could speak to the nuns, because yet again, I was sent to detention for this or that situation, which was usually very innocent at this point in time. We're passing notes or talking in the hallway or doing some ridiculously innocent little thing, all right? And I knew then that I had a choice to disappear or not. And I did my best to stay on this side of the rules, this side of the law. But no way in Hades was I going to be made smaller. I was just going to do my best not to end up in reform school and not to end up being grounded yet again for a week or something, but just to play it, knowing that eventually someday, God willing, I would still live to get out of that situation, and I would live to move on and have a life beyond it. It truly does become a choice. And when I work with those who have given up, or those who've never really chosen life, they've chosen survival. Right. For whatever the reasoning, it doesn't include violence. It doesn't have to have included anything. They just have chosen survival. What I do is, one, why did you come and see me? Because you would not have come to see me if you want somebody who's going to support survival. So clearly there's something in you that chose to work with me. Even this is just an introductory session. You chose to waste your time, your afternoon, and your money to spend a couple hours with me so that you could experience. And because I truly see that. If they absolutely didn't want a strong life force, they would have avoided me like the plague. If they came to spend time with me, there's something about being alive that draws them. And so I go and look at what is it about being alive that stimulated them enough to call and then to come in.
Well, I have to say, I'm having my own little epiphany right here, because I know I asked some tough questions when people are resistant and, you know, they came here for a reason. But the way you just framed that was very poignant and very beautiful. And I feel like that just stirred something inside me to think about that a little bit differently, to say you're choosing this even if you don't even recognize it, because you're here for that. And there's just that power of choice that went even deeper. Like I had this huge aha epiphany as you said that just gives me these delicious goosebumps, thinking about how to really put that ownership back on that individual, especially when the resistance shows up and they're like, oh my God, I can't do this. You're not, and you were here for a reason. And you chose this moment in time. Talk about a great way to handle resistance and you know, that the whole sales process and the communication and the relationship development, all of that. There was just such an epiphany I had as you said that. It was very poignant.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't believe for a minute, and maybe because I've been a pioneer in my field, because I've been an activist for much of my life, I don't believe in fighting resistance. I don't believe in fighting the system. I don't believe in the battle.
Yeah.
What I continuously do is, why you sit here and tell me what I can't do? Let you keep talking while I walk around you and just keep on going. I'm not going to waste my time or energy fighting your resistance. And if you're a client and you're resisting me, that's okay too. I'm just going to come in another door.
Right.
I'm not going to fight your resistance to me. I assume because you're here, you want me to do my work that you're paying me for. And so rather than convince you I know what I'm doing, if all the degrees on the wall don't convince you, if all the certifications and all my CV doesn't convince you, my word's not going to either. So why waste anybody's time or energy?
Right.
Let's go in the back door and let me help you see something from another perspective. And we'll go from there. And my experience is, for most people who put resistance up, when you ignore the resistance and go around it, they don't know how to defend themselves against it.
Right.
Because their defenses know how to hit you straight on, and they have an expectation of how you're going to resist them, because they didn't do this to you. They do this in life.
Well, and that's the energy that they draw from, because it's what
right.
And it's interesting, because as somebody who has definitely learned how to let go of the resistance, I was very much a push or pull person my whole life.
Right.
Pushed a lot of rocks up hills, pushed people out of my way, was going to make things happen regardless. And it's even only been wide open the last couple of years where I realized that everything needs to be ease and grace, and that true power has nothing to do with force. True power is an ability to drop into that space of mindfulness that you talk about, that it makes it light and easy and allowing, and you receive, and you open up access for yourself and others. And it's been one of the most important lessons I've learned in my life, that I don't, being a type A personality, being whatever, I don't have to muscle my way through life. In fact, that was the intention. And anything that feels like a push or a pull is a force, a space of force. And when there's force, there's resistance. And that's actually, I was just talking about that on one of my Facebook Lives this morning, is that space of, or yesterday actually, was talking about that space of anytime you feel the need to push or pull, which means you're dragging something, know that there's a force behind that. And the only way force exists is there's a resistance. Right. And when there's a resistance, you're not allowing, you're not receiving, you're not leaning into. Leaning into is very different than pushing and shoving and that forceful space. And it's amazing that, you know, when you talk about that coming at a different angle, I'm even doing work with my dog right now to train him as a therapy dog. And one of the things that they teach that's so important is that you're able to walk around your dog without him feeling agitated or frightened, or there has to be that trust. And I use that because I think that's such a perfect analogy for what you just said, to create that space that's safe for people to get out of their resistance and be able to have somebody lift them or hold them from another angle, and know that someone's got their back, figuratively and literally.
Yeah.
Home.
Which may be the first time they've ever had that experience, physically and energetically. There's also a thought, when somebody is used to resistance, they're used to struggle.
Yes. Yes. Well, they're like a dog in that sense, right? Trauma creates that fight response, I'm going to protect the pack, I'm going to protect the whatever, that it's no different than that space of needing to protect myself, right? And so that's their first default, is protection and survival.
So if you give up that need for struggle and you give up that need for resistance, you're simply left standing there. And there's nothing to get defended about, so you can push and prove, because there's nothing to prove and there's nothing to defend against. You can simply go about doing your life purpose. You can go about doing your mission. And you don't think in the context of who's going to be my next obstacle or what's going to be my next. It might work and it might not work. And always there's an element of fear if we're growing, because if we're growing, we're always moving into something new. And no matter what it is, whether it's a higher level of client, whether it is a deeper level of relationship, there's always something we haven't experienced before that we know may not work.
Right.
But we also know it might work.
Well, and if it's not big enough to scare you, it's not big enough to grow you, right? And
right.
People think growth comes in their comfort zone. And the thing is unless you're being triggered, unless there's something worth losing, unless there's a risk involved, there is no growth that can happen in anything that feels safe, that doesn't feel as if it's urging you to explore something else about yourself. And it's interesting because I think about when people get because one of the biggest fears is failure, right? And I would challenge that most people, it's not a fear of failure, it's a fear of success. It's a fear of the responsibility that comes with stepping into that next level that I think scares people even more.
Yeah.
The fact that the failure piece is they don't even know their full potential capacity or capabilities until they're willing to go so big that they could fall down and get a little skinned up, right?
And the way I phrase that with my people is that, in my experience, those who are ready, they're being called. And I worked with one woman who had a wonderful company in Wall Street, ended up being bought out, and she then became the head of the American division of a global organization. Now, she could see herself as this kind of president, but now she had to be this president. And that much larger energetic footprint was absolutely terrifying. And so many of us want to walk in the big world, whatever that means to us. But that means we have to have a bigger energetic footprint. Yeah. And this woman here or this man here cannot show up in that position. Mm-hmm. You need to grow into the person who can fit those shoes and then expand them as you expand your ability, or you would not have been called in. They needed somebody bigger or more than who was there previously, which is why you're not being called to the table. And so you need to be willing to grow into the footprint that is that size or larger. And so many folks want to live in this illusion that this little me right here can handle that big job over there.
Right.
And you can't. You need to become the big energy field that can handle that bigger field.
Love that. I love that phrase. I might have to borrow that energetic footprint. That's a really great way to capture that. And I think about some of the work T. Harv Eker was doing, something that talked about, if the challenge is a 5, you need to raise yourself to be a 6. If you need to, it's that same kind of space, and there's a personal responsibility that's inside of that. And I think that really scares people, because to have that energetic footprint that says, okay, because I truly believe if God brought you to it, God will bring you through it, and you will have everything that you need to do the task. If you're being challenged, you will, and the trust is not when or how or why something is happening. It is, and trust that you'll be given everything you need to get that, to make yourself move along that path. The thing that shuts people down that I've seen is that space of, if I increase my energetic footprint, to use your phraseology, then I have to take a bigger personal responsibility for how I show up, because now I know more. I like the saying that says God loves babies and fools, right? And people think breakthrough is this big, huge, monumental thing, when actually the definition of breakthrough says it's the moment you have access to something that's more than what you had before. And so to know that when you know something else, you're no longer a fool, which means now you have to take responsibility, because what you didn't know before was one thing, but once you know, then there is a wider, higher, more robust personal responsibility that goes inside of stepping into that energetic footprint that you're talking about. And I think that is where people go, no, not for me. That's not mine. I don't want it, because I don't want to have to take responsibility for what I say and do in that space.
Well, and there's also the element that if they were to do that, they have to own more and more of who they're meant to be.
Yes.
And that's scary to say, I thought I was this smart. Now I have to be this smart. Right. Oh my God. That's scary, because if I grow and change, will I outgrow my partner? If I grow and change, will I outgrow my company? If I just keep growing and changing, will I outgrow all of my friends? What will happen in my reality if I become more of who I am meant to be? That is scary, because I don't know the ramifications.
Well, you saying that, I had a client once, and I'm going to share this with you, because this was such it so resonates and like exclamation points what you just said. I had a client that we kept getting into. I'm like, what are you afraid of? Because she just couldn't move forward, and was just kind of asking the question, and just kept asking the question. I'm like, what are you really afraid of? And she'd say something. I'm like, what are you really afraid of? And I'll never forget her response. She says, what if I have nothing to complain about? And I remember pausing and saying, so talk to me about that. What does that mean? She goes, if I have nothing to complain about, who would I talk to? And it became really clear to what you just said. Will I outgrow my friends? Will I outgrow my circle? Will I outgrow the people that have been my comfort blanket? Because imagine, and I looked at her and I said, imagine if you didn't have anything to complain about. She's like, and she just started to cry, and I cried with her, because it was such a profound, like, she finally got, her fear was, what if I don't have anything to complain about?
Yeah.
And I've said that it's in speaking engagements where people laugh, and I'm like, I know you laugh, but think about that. We've built a culture around complaining and commiserating. We don't build our culture typically around communicating and connecting on purpose. We connect through our complaining and commiserating. What happens when we stop complaining? Who's left if everyone around us is complaining? I just found that, and then you saying that just makes me remember that. Because yes, that is a huge fear. I personally believe that outside of abuse and infidelity, the biggest reason couples divorce is because one person is choosing growth and the other one stays still. And you can't grow and have somebody stay the same when doors are opening at every turn and you're being challenged to step forward, and someone's like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to watch TV on the couch. All good. You do what you got to do. You do you. At some point, you doing you means you don't need them. And so I do think that's a real fear for people. I think that's a real fear, is that they're going to lose what's comfortable. And that includes the people that they surround themselves with on a day-to-day basis.
But the thing is, though, it's not really comfortable. No. You know, I've worked, as a therapist, a PhD therapist here for 20 years. And with all the couples I worked with, even affairs don't have to end a relationship. It's very different if somebody betrays themselves in the partner and has a one-night stand or a one-week fling or something, and then they realize, oh my God, this is not who I am. What have I done? And they back up, versus somebody who's on his or her 12th affair in a 15-year marriage. Okay, we're talking two very different things. In the first one, you can say, what on earth happened that I even did this? It goes against everything I am and I believe in. And then it allows the two of you to really work well to see what's happening in this relationship that even happened. And you realize both of you have lost, as with many, the marriage can last 50 years, the relationship lasts 3. If you want the relationship to last as long as the marriage, you both have to be invested in it. And it's easy to stop investing in a relationship, whether it's with a friend or a lover or a spouse or a child even. It's easy to stop investing in it and go off on your own way and then wonder what happened to it. Anything that doesn't get fed dies. And so we need to keep feeding it, even our relationship with ourselves. And so my experience is that those who are frightened of outgrowing their marriage have a marriage that is so tenuous to begin with, that what they're going to outgrow is their ability to ignore what's taking place.
That's
all
a
right.
Powerful distinction.
Yeah.
Powerful.
And so if the two of you recognize that you have a marriage, but the relationship has been disintegrating, and the two of you are committed, because to me, you commit to your partner and you commit to your marriage. There's like two commitments that are taking place there. And so if the commitment is to the marriage for both of you, and you both look and say, what do we need to do for this to grow into who we choose to become? You may find out that one of them never wanted to grow. One of them never wanted to become more and has no intention of ever doing so. Then you have to realize there was always room for one person in this marriage, not two. And so what's ending is a piece of paper, not a relationship. That ended a long time ago. And so it really is looking at, if you're using your partner as an excuse, or your friends as an excuse, or anything else as an excuse, you need to recognize you have needed them in your life to give you permission to stagnate.
And I want you to say that last part again, that recognizing that you've given them permission. Say that again, because I think that is extremely powerful, and I want the audience to hear you say that again.
Yeah. If you are absolutely frightened of your personal growth, ending your marriage, ending your friendships, ending anything that's going on in your life, you have been using them as an excuse to stay stuck. Because the fact is, if they are truly in relationship with you, they will be walking forward with you.
Absolutely.
If you have both simply been finding a safe place to land, and one of you grows, there wasn't a connection there to begin with. It was simply a safe place to land. And then we need to look at why we chose the partner we did, who may be an absolutely wonderful person, but we chose them because they were safe and they would give us permission to stagnate.
Wow. I've had so many of those conversations with just friends of mine, even going through that realization, either in their marriages or relationships. Some have ended them, some have decided to engage together in them and grow together, where they've come to, the same events, they're doing things, they're putting that effort forth. But I think that's such a notable statement for people to hear, that if something is happening in your relationship, there again, it's that responsibility piece to recognize you are giving permission to stay stuck. You are using that person as a scapegoat, an excuse. And I always tell people, I'm like, look, if there is any way, shape, or form that you're blaming someone, that you feel the need to justify or rationalize something, or you're complaining about something, you're playing victim in some capacity. You are deciding to stay in a space that says you don't have choices, and you are not taking the responsibility and creating permission to say, I can make a different decision. Because any one of those three things is a sign that you're making excuses for yourself.
And so take a look at this, because this segment here is about leadership. We're talking about the leadership of your life. Who is taking leadership of their own life, and who is refusing to do that? And how can we be effective leaders in our company? If we are coaches, how can we be effective leaders in supporting others growing when we haven't done the same for ourselves yet? If you are a mom and a stay-at-home mom, which is a really intense full-time job,
absolutely,
you have got to be the leader in that house. The leader doesn't mean the dictator. The leader means the one that creates the culture, that creates the values, that creates the context in which everybody else has permission to claim their own personal leadership. And an effective leader trains leaders all around them. So even as a stay-at-home mom, again, an immensely powerful position, you have to own your leadership and the realization that you're training those around you to claim their leadership, not to survive on this journey, God willing, but to really define who they choose to be and claim the leadership of their own lives without feeling that you're now creating challenges to your authority. Right. And in fact, what you're doing is creating powerful people you can work with, even at 5 and 6 years of age, so that they own responsibility of the choices they make. They don't do this, well, they don't go to that party. That was a choice they made.
I've seen kids as early as a year and a half know that my dog knows the difference between choices he makes and consequences. I will say to him, Peyton, stop barking, or I close the door, and he looks at me, he looks outside, and he makes a choice, and he knows I'm going to do something. I've seen toddlers know the, and so people that'll say, well, I can't, absolutely can and should be creating that space where they are learning the power of choice from the moment you bring them into this world. And what does that mean? And it's interesting because I think, everything that you're saying, leaders grow other leaders, and it's not a title. It's not a, function of anything. It's about how you choose to show up and how you choose to serve. And
it's a state of being. It's an absolute state of being. Yeah.
And it's taking personal responsibility for how you are choosing to be you in that space to create an environment for others to feel permission to do the same. Because it's interesting. I mean, I even think about, I do a lot on this, we're not going to go way deep, but people talk about the word empowerment, and they talk about, I'm going to empower that person. I'm like, you do know that the actual definition of empowerment means power from within. I can't empower anyone who doesn't make that choice for themselves. I can do all kinds of things to inspire them, to support them, to love them, to raise them. And at the end of the day, power is something only I can decide to take for myself. And so I think it's interesting because in what you're saying, one of the things that always is startling to me is when people will say, well, I'm not going to make a decision. And my response to them is, you just made the most powerful decision you can, because you just handed your power over to anybody else but you.
Right. And when you look at that and see that for what it is, what you end up recognizing is that our personal power, no matter what our position is on this planet, no matter what we are doing on this planet, as we said earlier, somebody is drawn to our life force because they want, it's almost, I'm hoping it's infectious and I can catch that life force. Those who are drawn to us are truly drawn to their own life force, and they don't know how to reach it. When we walk in our leadership, whatever our position, people who want to be drawn to their own leadership will be drawn to us. Because by experiencing us, they are experiencing how to own their own leadership.
Absolutely.
Right? So we are modeling a state of being. We're not modeling the right way to do leadership. We are modeling the state of being in our leadership. Right. And in that, others who want that will turn to us to support them because they don't need us to talk about leadership. They are watching us live it.
You and I could talk for hours, and I'm like, oh, we're already starting to get over time. So, oh my gosh, we'll have to have you back for sure, because this is just I so want to just continue to have conversation with you. I'm finding this extremely fascinating and so relevant, especially in light of things that are going on right now. And as we're bringing things kind of to a head here, I want to make sure that I give people an opportunity to continue to connect with you and the work that you're doing. What is the best way, Dr. Dorothy, that they can reach out, they can learn more about what you're working on right now, how they can continue the conversation?
A direct way to reach me is my email, Dorothy at askdrdorothy.com. That's Dorothy, Dorothy, at askdrdorothy. Or go to my website, askdrdorothy.com.
Awesome. And we will have all of that for you in the show notes below, because definitely want to make sure that you stay connected and reach out, learn more about what this amazing woman is doing in the world and what she is modeling, and how you can continue to stay in conversation with her. And so, Dr. Dorothy, as we close this out today, and we've had such a just juicy, amazing, delicious conversation. I have loved every minute of it, and so grateful.
Thank you.
what is one last maybe nugget or aha or some words of wisdom that you would love to leave this audience with today?
In reference to leadership, because I want to bring it into the topic at hand, we are all called to leadership. Mm-hmm. This is not should I or shouldn't I, do I want to, do I not want to. You are on a cellular level called to leadership. The question truly becomes, am I going to relish in it, or am I going to spend my journey debating it? And the conversation gets very old very, very quickly, which is why people numb out. Taking ownership of the fact that every one of us is called to leadership and to joy and to just life and passion and vibrancy. It's a cellular life force that jump into everything you are, because the world needs us. The world needs those who live in authenticity. The world needs those who live in leadership, because we've seen, unfortunately, lately far too many who are surrendering their leadership in order to be liked by somebody who doesn't know how to effectively lead. So we really need to work to become everything we are meant to be and own our leadership, and then work in conjunction with other leaders. This is how we create the world and make it a much better place.
Oh, I so love that. Amen. And yes, it is an opportunity for you to own your leadership. And as always, it requires you saying yes to yourself and destroying the noise that gets in the way, and knowing that leadership is not only a choice, it is your obligation and it is your responsibility, and it is everyone's opportunity. And so I'm going to leave you with this as we close out today's show. First, let me just extend a heartfelt deep gratitude to my amazing guest, Dorothy. Thank you so much for joining us today. For all of you listening, thank you as always for tuning into the Powerhouse Podcast. Please make sure you subscribe, as we have so many amazing thought leaders sharing their insights and wisdom with you. And before we close today, I want you to remember that you don't know who, you don't know how, and you don't know to what level you can affect, influence, or impact change for another person simply by showing up. The question and challenge for you is, will you show up? With that, I hope you will own your leadership. Make it a phenomenal day. Know that I'm sending you heart-to-heart hugs, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Powerhouse Podcast.